Hello and welcome back to the Road to Broadway. My name is Ariel Reed, and this week we are diving into the world of burlesque. Now, when I say burlesque, I know the first thing that most people think about is striptease. And yes, striptease was a huge part of burlesque starting maybe in the 40s and up. 40s, 50s, 60s, and so on. But I want to talk about burlesque around the turn of the century. So, turn of the century, very early burlesque. Let's just talk about the name first. Let's start there. Burlesque. It comes from the Italian word burlesco, which the root of that is burla, which means joke or make mockery of. So the earliest burlesque shows were filled with comedy. They were parodies. They explored gender roles and sexuality. Early classic burlesque blended satire and humor and sensuality, and it often parodied popular culture or current events. So, those of you who watched from the syllabus, The Night They Raided Minsky's, this movie was made in the 60s, and it was about the Minsky brothers theater and how their burlesque shows would get raided and shut down by the police for risque, scantily clad women, and all of the above. I recommended that movie because the way that it depicts the style and the feel is spot on for what these earlier shows looked and felt like. So yeah, it was bawdy, it was comedic, it wasn't polished. That is in stark contrast to the Ziegfeld Follies, which kind of took the same concept but ramped it up 1,000% and presented beautiful long chorus lines of women who were in beautiful costumes, who walked the stage, who did tap dance numbers, but always included lots and lots of women. So Ziegfeld Follies was on Broadway, but it really was the first show of its kind to bridge the gap between the lower brow burlesque style and reach a broader audience with a Broadway show. So just as in vaudeville, where there were different stock characters or skits or sort of classic bits, we had the same thing with burlesque. So there'd be the sultry female, there'd be the henpecked, clueless husband. There was striptease as well, as I said, as it gets later. There were comedy duos, there were singing satires, there were tableaus of women, and there were classic bits like the fan dance, made popular by Sally Rand, or the balloon dance. The first credit given to successful burlesque shows were to Lydia Thompson and the British Blondes. And what I found most fascinating about Lydia Thompson in my research of her and her company, her troupe, is that in her shows, she would have the women of her troupe play all of the characters. So we really got a sense of play with gender, because the women were playing the male characters as well as the female characters. And so for the first time, you have women in drag dressed as men for the first time documented in terms of burlesque. So there were several key figures in burlesque: Lydia Thompson and the British Blondes, Sally Rand and her fan dance, which I'll show you a clip here. Dancing with Fans is used throughout so many shows, most notably Chicago. But many shows use the same sort of feather fans for their chorus numbers. We also have other key figures that are a little bit later, but very important to mention, like Lottie the Body and Jaden Wong. Gypsy Rose Lee, but who I would love to focus on right now is notably the most famous dancer, performer, singer, actress to come out of that time, Josephine Baker. So Josephine Baker was a famous dancer, singer, and activist, most popular in the 30s. She was on Broadway. She was part of the chorus in Shuffle Along and Chocolate Dandies. But she didn't really get her big break until she started touring France. Now, in France, she was a huge hit. She starred in motion pictures, she performed at all of the top clubs, and she really took off. Josephine Baker, most notably, was known for her comedic dance style and the way that she moved her hips. Here is a clip of her doing her famous banana dance. Life for Josephine Baker was very different in Paris than it was in the United States. The United States, segregation forced her to a limited role. But in Paris, she was able to take transportation however she liked to. She was a huge star, so she got special treatment and lived a life with more freedom than she had in the United States, as most Black performers experience. I think one of the most fascinating things about Josephine Baker and her life is that she was a spy for the Allied forces during World War II. She was approached by the head of French counterintelligence to gather information, all and any information that she could gather at these social events where she would perform and then socialize with people afterwards. And so she would pass off anything that she heard. Sometimes she would write notes. She collected detailed intelligence on German troops, where they were headed, what their plans were, and she would pass that on to French counterintelligence. Incredible. After the war, Josephine Baker was awarded the Resistance Medal by the French Committee of National Liberation, which is a huge honor. At the time of her reign, Josephine Baker was the most successful American performer in France. So Josephine Baker's performance style and dancing and singing and costumes all have influenced popular performance to this day. People like Beyonce, Marilyn Monroe come to the top of my mind when I think about performances or performers who were influenced by Josephine Baker. Burlesque really set the stage for chorus dancing, big choruses filled with beautiful women and long legs. Any show that you could think of that has that is definitely influenced by burlesque and has the mark of early turn of the century burlesque in it. Can you think of any shows that are like that? Do any of your favorite shows have elements of burlesque in them? Can you think of that? Think about that for Friday's discussion. Thank you for joining me. Next week, we are going to be talking about minstrel shows and their influence on Broadway as we know it.
Pour moi, y a qu'un homme dans Paris seul. rien y faire, mon cœur est pris par lui. Je crois j'en perds la tête, il est si bête, il ne l'a pas compris. Pour moi, y a qu'un homme dans Paris, c'est lui. Je passerai dans un trou souris pour lui. Chaque jour je l'adore, bien plus encore. Pour moi, y a qu'un homme dans Paris, et c'est lui. Pour moi, y a qu'un homme dans Paris. 20 fois par jour, par douzaine, des messieurs très amoureux me proposent une vie de reine pour que je me donne à eux. Y en a qu'un cas su me plaire, il est méchant, il n'a pas le sou. Ses histoires ne sont pas claires, je le sais bien mais je m'en fous. Il est si bête, il ne l'a pas compris. Chaque jour je l'adore, bien plus encore. Pour moi, y a qu'un homme dans Paris, c'est lui. Pour moi, y a qu'un homme dans Paris.
Jewels, a kiss on the hand may be quite continental, but diamonds are a girl's best friend. A kiss may be grand, but it won't pay the rental on your humble flat, or help you at the automat. Men grow cold as girls grow old, and we all lose our charms in the end. But square cut or pear shape, these rocks don't lose their